Well, welcome back. I had not been a physician very long before I was aware that patients who were significantly overweight had more health problems of various kinds than those who were not overweight. I myself was a little overweight, so that was of interest. Heavy people were more likely to have orthopedic problems, high blood pressure, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, even accidents, and other issues that caused them to come to the attention of the healthcare system. Because of this, my partners and I, during the late 1970s, entered into an obesity program that was designed to promote very rapid weight loss in those who had health problems related to their being overweight. We learned, of course, very rapidly what all of us know. It is very difficult for any of us to lose weight and to continue to maintain that weight loss. Patients in our program, believe it or not, lost hundreds of pounds, and in most cases they regained more than they had lost. This type of data, of course, began to bother my mind as a physician, because I began to understand that inability to deal with this health problem ultimately made it impossible to deal with rising healthcare costs. So by 1985, I'd become committed to developing programs that offered the medical public a better chance to manage this overweight problem. What a challenge. One of my first revelations in this regard came as my eyes landed on a medical paper, I think it was 1987, published in the Journal of Clinical Investigation, which is the most prestigious of all medical publications for us doctors. The paper was entitled, "Body Composition, Not Body Weight, is Related to Cardiovascular Disease Risk." The authors did underwater testing on a large number of individuals and determined that body fat storage, rather than body weight, was the factor that increased healthcare problems. I determined at that moment that I would make an effort to teach the concept of good body composition rather than good body weight as an important indicator of health. In those days, measurement of body composition was not done routinely in doctors' offices. It's still not. It was possible only to be done in research facilities. Over the years, new types of equipment for measurement of composition have fortunately become available, and I've been able to attempt to use almost all of them to some extent in my patients. Fortunately, technology has advanced in this arena, and it is now possible to measure the major components of body composition separately and accurately, albeit still not as inexpensively as this important measurement should be. And we'll get into discussing those various types of measurements the next time we get together. When we get on the bathroom scales in the morning and we say to ourselves that we're too heavy, are we saying that our bones weigh too much, or that our heart and our muscles are too heavy? Of course not. We're saying in most cases that we think we have too much stored fat. The problem is that the bathroom scale weighs muscles, bones, fat, water, everything else that's inside us. I learned very early that the bathroom scales, at least over a short period of time, tells us very little about our body fat stores. Remember the paper that I quoted above when I said that it is the fat stores and not the weight that causes the health problems? How can we tell the difference in fat and weight? Ideally, all of us should have a body composition study done. I hope many of you get to do those while we're doing this series. I have known many patients in our weight loss programs, for instance, who have lost as much as 20 pounds in the first week or two of their new diet. I learned and I intuitively knew that almost none of the lost weight was fat. In my 35 years of kidney medicine, I saw many patients who came for dialysis with a 20-pound weight gain over a weekend, and then lost the entire 20 pounds over 5 hours while they were on dialysis. Obviously, none of the weight removed by the dialysis machine was fat. You may rightly ask, how can we measure how much fat I have, or how can we really measure the amount of fat that I've gained or lost? What about my BMI? Every year, my health coach tells me that my BMI is too high. Mine is, and that I'm at risk of disease because of it. BMI, which is a measure of your weight in kilograms divided by the square of your height in meters, is a very nice concept for teaching groups of people, but it may not be the best tool at all for discussing ideal weight in any individual who's you and me. The truth is that there are heavy people who are lean, and there are light people who are fat. What I have learned is that management of bone mass, muscle mass, and fat mass have little to do with each other, and that good education in this regard must attempt to separate these tissues technologically and intellectually. Well, you might question at this point and say, well, who cares how much fat or muscle or bone I have at any point in time? The answer to us, in the health education business anyway, is found in the paper that I quoted. If increased fat in our tissues is the major cause of diseases, and maintenance of muscle and bone mass for a variety of other reasons is important, then we must know how to measure each of these tissues and manage them well. I understood by the mid-1980s that if we could not manage body fat well, then we could not manage health in our nation. Fortunately, over the years, new technologies have been developed to allow us to manage these tissues better, as I've said before. And as I began to understand this concept in more detail, I increasingly felt uneasy about counseling patients to go lose weight. While weight loss overall may be necessary for many patients, the understanding of how much fat needs to be lost and how it can be lost without loss of other tissues became increasingly important to me as a physician and a medical educator. I teach totally differently now than I have in the past about how to know when you're too fat. We'll talk about insulin and insulin rises and falls later, but we'll get into how do I know when I'm too fat later on. I've been for the past 30 years teaching the following truths to patients about composition. Number one, body composition is mostly regulated by our genetics. Number two, body composition may be modified by various medications and behaviors. Number three, the major measurable components of composition are our muscle mass, our bone mass, and our fat mass. Number four, what I've already said, scale weight is a relatively poor measure of body composition. Number five, currently, DEXA scanning is the best technology for measurement of body composition. In one of our times together, I'll be carefully reviewing a report on body composition by a DEXA machine. Hopefully you'll enjoy that and I'll enjoy teaching it. Number six, management of muscle mass, bone mass, and fat mass requires specific knowledge. Number seven, management of body fat stores is especially complex and requires thorough understanding of components of energy intake and energy output. And of course, I hope we have a chance to talk about those in future sessions. So let's begin our composition discussion today with a few minutes on genetics. Did you know that a little over 70% of what you and I become is related to the sperm and the egg? The studies of several hundred sets of identical twins at McGill University up in Montreal have shown that for most health issues, including body composition and weight, the major controlling factor is genetics. If your parents and grandparents died of heart attacks, then you're more likely to die of a heart attack. If your parents had type 2 diabetes, you're much more likely to develop diabetes than are individuals who have no diabetes in their families. Similarly, if your mother was 5 foot 8 inches tall and big boned and weighed 160 pounds, you're much more likely to look like her and not like some other woman down the street. Even the ratios of fat to lean tissue in our bodies are under a lot of genetic control. You may not be aware of it, but most good studies of composition have shown that most healthy people have a kind of genetic set point, a weight and composition maximum during various decades of life. Perhaps you've noticed in yourself that while you have gained weight over your adult lifetime, that you seem to get to a certain weight range and stay there for a number of years. This is not to say that our behaviors don't influence our weight and composition. Oh, they do. Nevertheless, our family genetic background determines much of how large we can become at any one time. The challenge, of course, is learning to manage our fat stores despite our genetics. I always say that our genetics may make it easy for us to be fat, but we don't have to be so. Because of genetics, maintenance of good body composition is a king-size challenge for many of us. The second point in this lesson is that various medications and hormones can strongly influence our composition. One of my most profound learning experiences in this regard came during the late 1970s and early 1980s when I was caring for a number of patients with new kidney transplants. All such patients in those days were required to take a relatively large dose of prednisone or Medrol or other steroid to prevent rejection of their new kidney. I remember that in 1 year, 25 of my patients, after their transplant, gained an average of over 100 pounds each. Obviously, this led to orthopedic problems, diabetes, high blood pressure, and a host of other issues. The prednisone in this case, which was necessary, led to the loss of lean muscle mass and bone mass and a huge gain in body fat, the worst of all worlds. Fortunately, over time, new anti-rejection drugs came to the marketplace and the need for so much steroid medication diminished. Weight gain is still a challenge, nevertheless, in this same group of patients. I also learned that over time that oral contraceptives and female hormones taken after menopause can cause profound changes in body composition. Estrogens by themselves do not cause fatness, but sometimes they allow a person who was not previously fat to eat their way to fatness and heaviness. Artificial progesterone agents found in oral contraceptives can significantly change both fat mass and bone mass and can make it extremely difficult for patients to accomplish weight and composition goals. I remember one young woman who was exercising aggressively and eating like a fly and was maintaining a weight about 30 pounds above her usual playing weight. It turns out that she'd begun taking a new contraceptive pill about a year earlier and that her composition began to change right thereafter. After a year of frustration with weight loss plans and aggressive exercise, she stopped her contraceptive, and over the next few months she lost 30 pounds and had a loss of mostly fat but some lean tissue as well. In her case, she needed to lose some of the lean tissue mass to be healthy. She'd actually gained the lean mass holding up the bigger person. The testosterone effect of her progesterone and her contraceptive was the problem in this case. There are, of course, many medications that can cause that same kind of thing to happen. For instance, various medicines cause our kidneys to hold on to salt and water. Blood pressure medicine, steroids, diabetic drugs, and a host of chemicals can cause expansion of body water and fat stores and lead to gross changes in scale weight. This, of course, is not fat, but if you're on the bathroom scales using those to determine your compositional health, you'll be confused and disappointed and probably make wrong choices about your diet. Even ibuprofen and all of its cousins that we can buy so easily can cause gain of several pounds of volume as the kidneys hold on to extra salt and water. This can cause confusion and consternation in people who are trying hard to lose weight. In fact, any body process or disease that causes retention of salt and water, that would include congestive heart failure, liver disease, a host of kidney diseases, even constipation, and medications of various kinds can cause large gains in body weight and a negative change in BMI with no change whatsoever in body fat. It's not fair, is it? Hopefully you can see from this discussion that body composition, not body weight, is what's important from a health perspective. At our next session, we will go into the measurement tools for composition and what must be known to manage muscle mass, bone mass, and finally fat mass, and how to waste fat without wasting muscles and bone. I'll look forward to our next time together. See you next time.